I'm Raj Chengappa from India Today, and I'm with Ashwini Vaishnaw, the Minister for Telecommunications, Railways, Information Technology and Electronics. But today we're going to talk about telecommunications. We've just concluded the historic 5G spectrum auctions. How satisfied are you with the outcome of this, and what is its significance?
See, the 5G spectrum auction has concluded with good success. It's a reflection of Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji's reform program. In September last year, he set out a very important structural and procedural reform. He followed it up with reforms in WPC, which is the spectrum management body of the country. Then there were reforms in how telecom towers are set, how the optical fiber cable which has to be laid, so what are the ROW permissions. So there is a whole series of reforms across the gamut of telecom sector, and what we see today, the result of the spectrum auction is basically a reflection of that reform process.
Now, in terms of the amount collected, the sums that were there, is it as anticipated, or you expected less, more? What did you think would happen in this?
So before the auction, all the estimates which were there from the analysts, from the industry bodies and everybody, the general anticipation was that anywhere between 80,000 to a lakh crore would be the spectrum auction result. But we are very glad that the whole industry has now come out of the deep trouble that it was in and getting into a new growth phase. That's why they've been able to take spectrum throughout all the bands, 700, 800, 900, 1800. So almost all the bands which were put to auction have been taken by the industry, and that's why the numbers which have come, a lakh and 50,000 crore, is basically a reflection that the industry is coming out of its deep trouble.
Now, how does it benefit people like you and me, the common man, and as well as the business? I mean, what is 5G, what is the promise of 5G?
So there are two different things that will be experienced by the users. Fourth generation was a kind of evolution over the third generation. The fifth generation 5G is basically a totally new way of designing a telecom network, and that's why the experience will be very different. There are two elements. First is latency, which is basically how quickly does the equipment or the phone gets connected with the tower, right? Second is the speed. So the speed in 5G is going to be almost 10 times the speed in 4G. Now, is this sufficient in itself? No. What is important is the entire ecosystem, the availability of towers, the availability of fiber, the availability of spectrum. All those things have been addressed, and that's why the experience is going to be significantly better. So I'll also like to show you.
Yeah, now when it comes, and this is the question I had wanted to ask you, because there was concerns with the Chinese company Huawei when the whole 5G auction process had begun. How have you avoided the fact that, there are a lot of security concerns that 5G throws up, and what are we doing to ensure that that doesn't happen? What is the substitute we are trying to make?
So when Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji announced the Atmanirbhar Bharat program, in that some of the critical technologies which are needed for our growth, the country decided, Prime Minister gave us a target that we must develop these technologies in the country. It was not an easy task. Developing the complete 4G technology stack end to end, which basically means the core network, the radio network, the network management system, and everything which is associated with it. Over and above that, moving from the 4G experience, building and designing the entire 5G ecosystem. What's important is, this has been done by a whole set of startups and other entrepreneurs who have come forward and put their efforts and resources in it. So if you see...
Yeah, can you take us through, I see here you've got the core. This is exactly what Huawei and others were making, and we are now doing this in India, you're saying?
Absolutely. So the core network, the radio network, all the elements of the radio network, even the chip which goes in the entire setup, all these are now designed by our Indian entrepreneurs, by our startups. They are not only going to install these in India, but they are also getting now international orders. So, I mean, Verizon has recently given orders to an Indian startup for supplying many of the radio equipment. Then other companies in Europe, other companies across the world are today giving orders to Indian entrepreneurs. So the Make in India combined with the philosophy of Atmanirbhar Bharat, together all that effort which has been put by the government and the industry together has today resulted in developing the complete ecosystem of equipment in the country, which will be deployed in the country and then taken to the world. So you remember when when CDOT developed the racks, right? Rural exchange.
Yes.
That was a game changer.
Right.
That was a game changer because that is one exchange which could have been, that was 35 years back, that could have been taken to the world, any part of the world it will operate, right? For a long period that technology journey got scuttled, and that started once again in the recent times, and the core network developed by CDOT is today actually seen by the whole world. World is waiting for getting a good trusted solution out of India.
And this is developed virtually in India, this whole thing that is here. This is the core network that you're talking about.
So this is a piece of it. Core is basically a software, right? It resides in computers and servers and equipment like this.
Right.
So the core has been designed fully in India. Radio has been designed. Radio is all these equipment that you see, the transmission and the receiving stuff. So all these things are again designed in India, completely developed in India and now manufactured in India. So it's a very interesting journey which will, and see, the International Telecom Union, ITU, which sets the standards body never had any IP right from India for the entire 2G and 3G and 4G, right? For 5G, the first IP rights, which is a very critical application which basically defines how the tower is going to radiate from, right, they radiate the radio waves so that they are received in a very nice way by the mobile phone. That IP right now has been accepted as a standard by ITU, and we get into a very small club of countries who have their IP rights getting into the global standards.
Something like the Space Department, which has satellite launching, and atomic energy, which has reactors. So this is one telecom. We've now established ourselves in terms of that. But coming to a very layman question, how quickly is this rollout going to happen? When do you expect to see, when can we get 5G on our phones that's there?
So we have been working in close synchronization with the industry. Even before the auctions happened, right, we had requested the industry to please start setting up their equipment all over the country as much as possible. And auction concluded yesterday. Today morning itself, our committee of secretaries has already had the meeting and approved the spectrum allocation. Very rapidly, maybe by 10th August, we should be able to allocate the spectrum, and then setting up the equipment, tuning them, getting them up and running, we should be able to roll out 5G in October.
Now, there were a lot of safety concerns that were raised. There was even a court case filed by an actor about how safe is 5G, whether this network would impact us in any way bodily. That's one. Can you answer, is that a safety an issue, and have you addressed that one?
So we should look at these things from good evidence and scientific data point of view, right? A PIL, then orders from PIL is not something which is very scientific. I would say if the global standards are 100 for electromagnetic radiation, in India the average EMF level is just 10, which is a tenth of the global standards, right? Human beings are human beings. They are same in Europe, they are same in US, they are same in India, right? So if the standards for electromagnetic radiation are 10 times more in other parts of the world, why should we have a low radiation like this? Because a low radiation basically means that our ability to provide a good quality of service is hampered.
Right.
So that is one thing. I would say no, definitely we have a very safe and secure environment and very good standards. We should definitely be raising the EMF rather than keeping it at the current level.
And the other issue was, we saw various US airports protesting and saying that they will not allow 5G equipment close to them. Is that a problem that India would face, that the moment 5G comes up there would be issues of that?
So that was a very specific problem to US, because some of the frequencies they had assigned for 5G were very close to the legacy aircraft, old aircrafts, which were using that particular frequency or a frequency near that for their altimeters.
Okay.
We in India, and in fact most of the countries, have actually left a significant gap between the frequencies that are used by aircraft equipments and the frequencies which will be used for 5G. So that's not a risk.
And the third thing is that with private companies bidding, Reliance Jio and Vodafone's this thing, as well as of course Adani's group, what equipment will they be using? Because we had said no to Huawei and various countries had said so. How will they make up, and are we concerned about the kind of equipment that they would get in for 5G, and would it compromise our security in any way?
No, we have a very well-defined trusted source regime. So this is a regime which is very scientifically done, very neatly defined. So any equipment which doesn't meet our trusted regime framework, then that equipment will not be used. Good thing is we have a complete ecosystem of equipment, we have a complete ecosystem of software, we have complete ecosystem of handset manufacturing, all that is available in the country now. Now,
there are two other factors that, one is the cost factor. You have say 800 million smartphones in this country, but only 7% is 5G enabled. People like you and me, can we now afford to get into 5G? How expensive would the equipment be? And second is the tariff. Because okay, we have the equipment, but if the cost is too much, we may not use the 5G. How do you rationalize that in this?
In terms of equipment, the handsets, as and when the ecosystem develops and the service becomes available, immediately the ramping up of those equipments happens, right? In India, today, we are the second largest manufacturer of mobile phones in the world, right? Close to 25 to 30% of the mobile phones which are manufactured in the country are already 5G enabled. So many of these will get sold in the country now once the service is launched, right? Second, the cost of 5G enabled handsets is coming down every year. Entry level 5G phone today is around 15,000 rupees as the entry level phone. That number is again coming down, and over a period of 5-6 months or maybe 1 year, most of the phones will already be 5G enabled only, right? So that is a journey which happens in every technology cycle. The second part of it, Indian telecom market, Indian telecommunication service is today among the most affordable telecommunication service in the world as per the ITU affordability index. So I think the trend is going to continue as among the most affordable in the world, even in 5G also.
Now, one of the issues we had with 4G and 3G was in terms of the efficiency and the quality of that. Many of us had call drops, problems that were there. There were even court cases, and even the TRAI had to intervene in terms of, ensuring that this quality is improved. How will we get the 5G but not the benefits of 5G with our system, or how is that infrastructure going to change for us?
There are three things which combine to form an ecosystem which gives good quality of service. First is availability of spectrum. In the auctions which concluded yesterday, a large number of gaps which were there in the spectrum for many operators, those gaps have been filled. People have taken the spectrum, for example, 1800 megahertz, right? If somebody didn't have that spectrum in UP East, they have taken that spectrum for UP East. That kind of phenomenon has happened in this auction. So sufficient, because the spectrum is the most important raw material for telecom industry. If raw material is not available, then the service is bound to be poor. Second is towers. You need significant number of tower infrastructure to be able to reach out to each and every corner of the country, right? So the reforms that Prime Minister Modi ji did, those reforms have today resulted in a tower permission coming in a few minutes compared to few months or years, right? That time frame has now shifted to few minutes sometimes. So that means more towers can be easily installed. Third is the alternative of fiber. While we have done quite a lot on fiber, we have also created an alternative to fiber, which is basically if two towers have to be, let's say,
from here to here.
Yeah, there are two towers which have to be connected from here to here. In the old setup, generally a fiber would be laid from the base of this tower to the base of this, right? Let's say they are 5 kilometers away. So a fiber would have to be laid, or a microwave connection would have to be set. Microwave is not very efficient. In the reforms, we have allowed E-band, which is a very high frequency, almost like a pencil, almost like a laser it moves, right? That E-band has now been allowed for connecting one tower to another.
Oh.
So let's say you have a handset in your hand, right? Your mobile phone is connected to this tower.
Right.
From this tower it has to go to this tower signal, right? Then from this tower it connects to my handset.
Right.
This communication now between this tower and this tower, tower A and tower B, becomes very easy because of an E-band connectivity between them.
But what are you doing about fiberization? They say that 5G requires a lot of fiberization. We have only 30% in the country. What have you all done to streamline that process so that things move quickly?
So that's the Prime Minister's Gati Shakti framework, in which all the infrastructure has to be planned in an integrated way. So all the states in the country have today joined PM Gati Shakti portal, in which permissions for laying fiber has become very, very simple. Now we are working with all the agencies, which is your highway or railway or the transmission line, power department. We are working with them to reduce the cost of laying fiber, right? Third, now we are nudging the other ministries like the highway ministry, the railway ministry, and in the transmission lines, wherever there is a linear infrastructure, why can't we have a public duct along a railway line, along the highway, so that anybody who wants to lay a fiber can use that duct and set it up very quickly. So these steps are work in progress.
And I have finally two questions. One is, of course, the fact that many countries have said spectrum is a public good. We shouldn't be pricing it too high. Do you think India has priced it too high, or what is the reasons we are pricing us in the manner that we did? What went behind the thinking?
So we do have a very evolved model for how the spectrum price should be, based on pure economics. And see, Indian market is a very large market, right? The number of subscribers is huge. So even if the price per unit is low, multiplied that by the number of subscribers, it gives a very high revenue level. Based on this understanding, I think our spectrum pricing is very adequate. And of course, I agree with you that there is definitely an element of public good. Post-COVID world is very different from the pre-COVID world. Pre-COVID world, digital was a part of life, but a very insignificant part of life. Today, it is integral to our life. So there are countries which have made spectrum free of cost today. There are countries which have made spectrum cost practically very, very minuscule. We in our country, with our realities and our setup, economic, legal, technical, all kind of things put together, I think we have put a very reasonable number.
It was not that the ghost of 2G scam was haunting you all, and you all were worried about the fact that you all will be accused of selling the spectrum cheaply, as it happened in the previous governments.
Absolutely not. We, in Prime Minister Modi ji's government, the clarity on policy is very much there. Very clearly we know our goal is to serve the last person in the society. Antyodaya is the fundamental thing in the inclusive growth, is the fundamental thing in the way we think. All our programs are basically revolving around the poorest of the poor, bottom of the pyramid. So that way the policy clarity is very much there. We don't go by those ghosts.
And finally, on BSNL, many people think that it's a cow that should have been put away. You know, too costly, too much of a white elephant. Why have you made plans to now revive it and pump in, I think, 1.63 lakh crores?
So BSNL is a very important market stabilizing force in the telecom market. Telecom is a very strategic sector. It's a sector which can really affect the country's security in a big way. Almost all the critical defense infrastructure, telecom infrastructure is done by BSNL, first. Second, who's going to go to the poorest of the poor areas, right? The villages of Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, the northeastern states, the border areas, who's going to go there? Those are unviable from pure commercial areas. Do we leave those people behind? No, we shouldn't. It's our goal, it's our political philosophy, it's our thought process to make sure that they are all included in the digital journey. The digital divide should be minimized. Who's going to do that? BSNL will be able to do that. Third, when we have these new kind of equipments coming, new experiments, new ideas coming up, we need one large platform which can scale up, which can test all these things. the entire world which developed telecom technology, the few countries which developed telecom technology, they all use their state-run network for testing and developing the technology. Then the technology went abroad, right? We will also be using our PSU as the base for setting up, for testing new technologies. Fourth, despite all the issues, BSNL has a very, very loyal subscriber base of 10 crore plus subscribers in the country who are very loyal to BSNL. So our philosophy is BSNL must become a vibrant, a solid, a techno-savvy, a company which is a very important market stabilizing force in a highly competitive, highly agile telecom market.
You're not worried? Indian Airlines had the same argument in the sense, who will serve the remotest thing? So airports were set up, planes were flying to those places, and then it ended up with a huge loss-making unit and then went off, has now been hived off as Air India to a private company. Do you think that BSNL will head in that direction while the objectives are laudable and noble, but at the end of the day public money is being spent on that?
So very clearly laid out business plan has been made by BSNL. The revenue streams are basically two. One is fixed line, which is basically today broadband, right? The internet connectivity to your home, the Wi-Fi routers that you put in your homes, right? That's a very significantly large subscriber base that BSNL has. As we speak, every month BSNL is adding about 1 lakh new connections every month. 1 lakh new connections every month. That's self-sustainable on its own. What we are going to provide BSNL is the spectrum which it needed, which should have been provided by the UPA government. Subsequently, there were lots and lots of issues because of legal cases and all, but now all those things are behind us. Now we are providing them the spectrum. Second, we are providing them the basic capital required for upgrading the network from 2G, 3G to 4G and then 5G.
So it will never become like Indian Airlines or Air India?
That's a totally different.
Right. And finally, the last question. What is the revolution that you see that 5G will, we are coming right back to the topic itself, which will bring to our lives? I mean, if you can simply put it, you and I, how will it change us?
Two major things will happen. Health sector is going to go through a big change by 5G. People will be able to talk to the medical professionals in a very real-time environment. Second is education. These are the two sectors which are going to be most changed by 5G. Education will get redesigned using 5G as the core, digital as the core, and everything around it. Unlike in the past where there was education as one big thing, but digital was associated with it. Now it will be digital at the center and 5G around it. I mean, educational services around it. Same thing, digital in the center and healthcare services around it. Those are the, in my opinion, those are going to be the two most important changes that we will see. Of course, there will be many more. Drone will become very usable with 5G. Agricultural IoTs, for example, a very popular use case all across the world for 5G is that when the pipe which is taking water to the sprinklers in a farm, that pipe is getting deteriorated, right? Why can't we simply put some small little sensors which are then communicating using 5G to a network, right? And give start sending water only and only when the moisture level has gone down below a particular threshold, then only you start pumping water.
So the connectivity, this will enable all that connectivity and also transform business, I would gather. That will also be the other, apart from common men that is there on this. Where would you see in business is the big potential?
Lots of use cases are coming. For example, somebody wants to sell a particular handicraft. Today with 5G, they will be able to real life show what is that particular handicraft to a buyer in US, right? Or a small machine manufacturer can actually get the advice of a very important technician sitting in Germany and say that, okay, this is the problem, this is the defect, we are able to solve it. So those kind of use cases will, imagine any scenario where two persons need to talk and those two persons are at thousands of kilometers of distance. They need to interact in a meaningful way, all those scenarios will get activated, those will become real with 5G.
It's like exciting times. It's like sci-fi when you talk about it. But Mr. Ashwini Vaishnaw, thank you very much for this interview and talking exclusively to India Today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.